Hey guys, how you doing today? It's your girl Donna, and today I'm going to be doing my November reading wrap up. I read 14 books in November, and most of them were like 4 or 5 stars for me. Yeah, only had a couple of 3-star reads, so it was a pretty good reading month. I had a good time. It was actually one of my best reading months of the year. I think the only other month where I read more books was in February. So anyway, the first book I read was Rhythms Blues, and I think I borrowed this one from the library. So I had it on audiobook, and this one is a romance. This was a 4.5 star for me. It was really wonderful. It was one of my favorite books of the year, actually. It was a really good book. I think in this book it was about the FMC. She was in a relationship with this dude in the music industry, and he was doing some things behind her back, and then she left him, and he wanted to be delusional, thinking he could just get her back just because he was who he was. And anyway, she met the MMC, and he was everything, and they got together. It was a beautiful love story. Loved it. Definitely recommend to read. Then I read Never Saw Me Coming by Tanya Smith, and this book was funny as hell. I love this book because it was unexpected. It was basically about this girl. She started as like a kid. She was obsessed with like Michael Jackson and different artists. So basically, what started off as her using her talents and curiosity to try to meet Michael Jackson and the other celebrities that she liked ended up escalating in her learning how to outsmart the banking system. So basically, in this book, she was using her skills to call these companies and get them to write off people's debt, or just completely either erase the debt or postpone their bills and stuff like that. And she was able to escape for a while, but eventually the FBI caught up to her, and even though they got up to her, they still didn't know how much money she actually was able to get away with. So this is her kind of autobiography. It was funny, it was interesting, and I had a great time. Then I read The Last Dragon of the East by Katrina Kwan, and this was a nice short fantasy book about these dragons. So it's basically this guy, I forgot his name right now. He had run a tea shop with his mom. His mom, she got sick. He got some dragon skills from the doctor to help fix her, and when it actually works, he gets commissioned by the emperor to go find the dragon, because the emperor needs the dragon. And then once he meets up with the emperor, the dragon, they have like a little fun family moment, him and this other character, the side character. And then eventually they bump heads with the emperor, and it was a really cute story. I liked it. If you like fantasy books with dragons, but you don't like books that are super long, super complicated, their magic system is out of this world kind of thing, then this is a nice book to give a read. I also read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and this is the first book in the Stormlight Archive series. I think this was like the 5th book I've read by Brandon Sanderson for this year, and it's safe to say he is an author that I like. I enjoy his storytelling. He tells a lot of story though, because his books are long as hell. This book was over 1,000 pages, and it's not like if the font was big, so that's why the book is long. No, the font is like regular size to small size font, and it was still 1,000 pages. But the story was storying, right? There were some main characters in here that I loved. Kaladin Stormbless, I loved him. He is Captain Saber. Okay, he is Captain Saber Hope, but I love him though. I love him. He wants to save everybody. He is here for the downtrodden. He is depressed. He is hopeless, but he is fighting against the mad, and I love him. Then we have Daddy Dalinar. Who did I get Daddy from? I started calling him Daddy Dalinar even before I read this book, because of Jess from Jess Owens. I heard her refer, and it just stuck in my head. So he is forever Daddy Dalinar. But I love him too. And if you're into fantasy series, I would say absolutely give this a try. I am hoping to start Words of Radiance, which is the next book in this series, really soon. I started with the other series. What is the other one called? You know what it is if you look. It's a 3-book series. I loved it too. One of my favorite books came from there. Hero of Ages was in that series. But yeah, definitely if you love high fantasy and you don't mind tomes, give this one an absolute try. It was so good. Then I read Christmas in Spite of You by Casey Mills, and this was a really sweet Christmas romance book. So I think basically in this one, the main female character, she is renting out her apartment. She was going through a change in job, so she lost her job, so she's trying to figure stuff out with her, launching her own company and all of that. And so she was renting out her apartment for a week as a way to get money, but then she forgets to cancel the reservation, and in comes the MMC, and he walks in, and he's there cleaning the dishes in her sink, and she's up like, well, what's going on? Who's trying to steal my dishes, right? And then she walks out, she sees him, a little sparks fly. He likes what he sees, she likes what she sees, but he is not into Christmas at all. He's about work, he's about get that money. And so she convinces him to let her show him about what Christmas is like. And she also helps him getting in contact with someone that he wants to make a deal with for his company. And sparks fly, they get it together. And then, they had a little separation period, but then they figure stuff out and they came together. And it was so sweet and so lovely. I love this one. If you're looking for a quick Christmas book to read, but you don't know where to start, I would suggest this one. It was so nice. Then I read a different Ghetto Story by Kevin Charles, and this is a book set in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's about these two boys that are friends when they're young, and then one of them gets a football scholarship, but right before he leaves to fulfill that scholarship, his friend gets in a little bit of trouble and gets wrapped up in a gang. And then it's basically showing the trajectory of both of their life, where it goes because of those circumstances. And then they come back together when the friend who has the scholarship, he comes back home to visit, and you see them interacting, and it's just a story of their life and showing how much their life is affected by these outside circumstances, as well as the decisions that they make for themselves. Then I read a novel, Christmas by Charity Shane, and this was, so far, it's my favorite Christmas novel that I've read ever. So this one is about this lady. She is an author, and I guess her sales and her popularity starts going down. So her editor or publisher ends up calling her in, and they're like, listen, we know you're not doing the way we expect you to do, so now we want you to write a Christmas book. And she's like, Christmas is not my thing, like, what do you want me to do? So now she goes to this town that is all about Christmas, and she meets this dude. He is like on the Christmas calendar, it's his fireman suit and everything, and they have a little romance, but it doesn't start off as an obvious romance. They are very attracted to each other, but they try to keep it together, and eventually, things start happening in the spirit of Christmas, and it's about them working through their own things, because the MMC, he does have things related to his past, and they're sad things. But it was so nice seeing her whole space for him, and seeing him show up and be so considerate and kind and loving towards her. And it's such a sweet story. Then I read The Day God Saw Me as Black by Daniel Thomas. And let me tell you, this book hit me for six. It bowled me over. I don't know what I was expecting when I went into this book, but it wasn't this. There are so many conversations in this book about what it means to be Black and Christian, especially growing up in the Black church, and the kind of questions that you would have as a Black person, or questions I had as a teenager growing in the church, and seeing the things that the church is teaching versus the reality of what you're going through, and your history of what your people would have gone through, and things that you know that may happen in the future. And it was so good to see the author have such an honest conversation and really go there with it, not just gloss over things and be like, don't question that. No, like, she really went in there and had questions and said things that I know I've wondered to myself, asked out loud, or been afraid to ask and stuff. So it was a really, really good and compelling read. And I commend her for being brave, because it's not easy to talk about these things like that out in the public, but she did, and it's a really good book. Then I read Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhouse, and this was the final book in a trilogy. The first book is Black Sun, and then we have Fevered Star, and finally Mirrored Heavens. And I love this book. It was such a good ending. In this book, basically, we have a main character that his mother did a ritual to turn him into a vessel for a god, the crow god, and he comes back as the crow god. He does what he's supposed to do, and he was supposed to die, but because he didn't die after the mission was completed, now everybody wants his head. They're like, okay, we're glad you did what you did, but it's time to go. So now it's him battling this godhood within himself, but also trying to figure out who he is as himself, because he has to put so much of himself aside for this mission. He doesn't really know who he is, but he's trying to be seen. He's trying to get there, and it's such a sad story with him. It's such a touching story seeing him go through that journey, but I loved it. Then we have the other characters. We have other vessels of other gods. We have Narampa, who is a vessel for the sun god. And I actually really loved her journey in this book more than I liked her more in this book than I liked her in the first book, especially. She wasn't bad in the first book, but I loved her evolution and her maturing and really seeing the world for what it is across these 3 books. And I loved her journey in this book because it wasn't the typical journey that you would expect in fantasy books. Like the end she got, I loved it because it was unexpected, but it was like, damn, yeah. No, it's a went there. And then we also have Zyla, who is a Teak, which is kind of like Cyrene-ish community, and she is in love with Serapio. They're in love with each other, Serapio the crow god, and it's her journey getting back to him and trying to protect him from all these people that are coming at him in this all-out wars that's going against these countries. And yeah, it was a really, really good book. If you haven't read the series, it is the Earth and Sky series. I definitely recommend it. It is such a great book. And it's, even though it's fantasy, I will say it's not a complicated fantasy. So the magic system is not something that's going to hurt your head, and you're trying to figure out, okay, I got to keep track of this, I got to keep track of that. No, the author lays it out really nice for you, and it's so easy to follow along. Then I read The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson, and I actually really like this book too. Now, I do read some romanticies, but romanticy is not my favorite type of books, because honestly, I find like a lot of romanticy books, it's usually either the fantasy doesn't actually fantasy, it's barely there, and I love fantasy. I love romance too, or the romance, they push the romance so much, but they still make it half-baked. It's like they see each other, a little bit of fantasy, boom, they're in love and they're together, and you're like, wait, what? Or they drag it out, but you don't get to see the real connection building between the characters. But this book doesn't do that, and I love that for me. This book was a really nice balance between fantasy and romance, and I like that. So in this book, we have the female character. She has some powers, but she doesn't really understand these serpents, black smoke like powers. And then, her brother is marrying her off to this guy that they call the Wolf King, and he's supposed to be the big badass. But of course, she meets him and she realizes, yeah, he's all of that, but he's not an asshole to her or anything like that. Her brother has married her off to this man because he expects her to die because of the power that she has, and he's hoping that when she dies, he can blame this king and wage war and take over their lands and benefit economically from it. And she now is trying to get away from both of them. She don't want none of these men controlling her life. She wants her independence. She wants her power. So she's doing everything she can to get rid of both of them. Eventually, she comes to agreement, and things start to work themselves out. And the way this book ended, ma'am, I need book 2. I'm ready for book 2. I'm just saying, right? The way this ended, I'm invested, and I need the next book. Then I read Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, and this is a standalone in a Cosme. And honestly, as a standalone, it's cool. It was a cute story, but in the grand scheme of things, I could have skipped this one. To be honest, I could have skipped this one. It wasn't like this big thing that, oh my god, when I done read. Like, I read Elantris and I loved it. One of my favorite books. I read, which is also a standalone, but I read this one and I was like, yeah, okay, why did this book have to be so long? Why did I even bother reading this book? In this book, the magic system is based on breaths. Like, so you have the breath that you're born with, but you can get breaths from other people, but they have to will it to you. And the more breaths you have, the more vibrant and the more alive things are to you. You can also put breaths into inanimate objects and cause them to move, give them commands. You can put breaths in undead things as well, make them undead as well. There are gods in this world, which are basically people that are reborn, and they have also been given the breath, and they have a longer lifespan because of those breaths. So it was a cute story. It was about these two sisters. One of them was supposed to be married off the like this god king that they think is like this god above everybody. And then because war is looming, the father ends up sending his second daughter because he's so close to the first daughter. He can't imagine the sight of her, giving her up to this place where she might be killed because of the pending war and doom. So he sends the younger daughter, but the younger daughter ended up being a perfect fit for the God King, and it's their journey. There's a lot of political stuff happening. Like I said, the story is interesting. I just the story by itself was interesting. It's just when you think about everything else happening in the cosmos, I'm like, okay, all right, cool, all right, you know. Then I read Tangled Root by Kalila Williams. And let me tell you, this book had me hot. Right? So in this book, we have this girl, she's in high school. Her mom is like a research professor that gets a job in like rural Virginia. And they move over there, and they're in this kind of hillbilly kind of town where they're stuck in the 1840s, right? Is that kind of, right? So the people are there are not very open-minded. They haven't evolved. They haven't, come to terms with the fact that the world is a new place now. And her mom is really fighting for the right to claim that this founding college was actually started by one of their ancestors. And it was actually stolen and taken over by these other people in the town, that the founding family of the town. And so the mom is fighting to her research of that. And then while they're up there, the daughter, she discovers the gravesite of this young girl, and she's like really intrigued about this lady, and come to find out that the research the mother's doing and the research the girl is doing on this random person actually intertwine and is actually part of their own family history. So it was really good. The thing that had me hot about this book is that the mother is really, because of her own experience, she's really set on being like this perfect person, this perfect professional, this well acclaimed, all these accolades, and that's what she wants for her daughter. But she does not ever in this book take the time to figure out where does the daughter's passions lie, what does she want to do for herself, and nothing like that. She's just hell bent on being this perfect example of excellence, and she has no care for that. So that really annoyed me, because I'm like, why won't you? I'm like, I'm in support of being your best self, but she looks down on the daughter's passions, and she never really has that conversation with her. And then at the same time, the daughter lets go. I didn't like the end of the book. The end I felt was like a cop out. The daughter eventually acquiesced to what the mother wants, but I just really thought it would have been a good opportunity to strengthen their relationship if there's a conversation more about why the mother is the way she is, and as well as compromising on what the daughter wants for herself as well. Then I read A Cruel Kindness by Rory L. Scott, and this was another new to me author. This book was decent. No, this was a decent read. So in this book is like, it's a fantasy romance book. So it's a romantasy. I wouldn't say it's a fantasy romance. No, it's a romantasy, right? Because I do classify fantasy romance versus romantasy as two separate things. This is a romantasy. And then it's dealing with like mating bonds and stuff. So basically in this world, your mating bond comes, but there are different levels to the mating bonds, and they come up like these tattoo things on your body, but they'll be matching with your partner. So the more accurate the tattoo, the more accurately the tattoos match each other, the stronger your bond. So you could have like a 60% match, or 70-something, 80-something, and those are cool. But once you get into like the 90s, that means things getting really sticky. But if you have 100% match, that means that is like your partner. That means if that person dies, it can affect your health, and you'll go cuckoo and lose it too. So this was about these two people that knew each other before, and they end up being bonded to each other. And because they're bonded to each other, one of them is already in the army fighting. So this other person has to join the military as well and go help them fight this war that they're fighting against this other planet. And there is a little political stuff happening in here, just a little bit. You don't really get, like, you hear about it and you get told about it, but you don't witness too much of it. Where so they're basically trying to stop this war, stop this other people by controlling this bridge that goes between the two planets. And basically there's a little twist because we're trying to figure out who really started this war and why can't they end it. So if you like that sort of thing, I really love mated books, and this is actually the most interesting mating bond I've seen, with the tattoos and the fact that they couldn't be too far against each other. And the bond in this book, the bond has its own personality. And the bond is literally like talking to them in their head. And the bond is like over the chain. The bond is jealous. It's psycho. It wants to kill, right? It wants to everybody that they think come close to you. And it also wants them to commingle and get in there a lot. But yeah, I really like that part of it. Was like my favorite part. And then finally, to round out the month of November, I read Untethered by Angela Jackson Brown, and this was one of my favorite books for the month. This book was such a sweet story. So basically, we meet this Katia, this female FMC. She works at this home for boys, so boys that need like a second chance because of whatever's going on in their family life, their home life. They can't stay at home. So they come to this home and she runs this home. But she's running the home, but the whole board of directors is made up of all these men except one other woman. And of course, these men don't want her to be in this position. So she's getting heat from them. She's dealing with the foster care system and how they're dealing with these boys and how they treat them, because it's also historical fiction. She has two brothers and they go off, they join the Marine Corps and they go off the war. And you already know that time, I think it was like in the 1950s. I don't remember the exact year. But let me see, what year was this? No, 1967, right? And then Alabama, right? So you already know. So she's dealing with that. So one of her brothers ends up missing. So they're also dealing with that. She's also dealing with her relationship and love and trying to figure out if marriage and kids is also something for her. And it's a really touching story. This is a book that definitely moved me to tears. And I really liked it. I think everybody needs to read this author because this is the second book I've read for. I read one book in October, one in November, and they were both top tier. They were both top tier reads, awesome historical fictions. So if that is your jam, definitely give it a go. So yeah, guys, so those are 14 books I read in November. Let me know if you've read any of these or if I've interested you in reading any of these. Okay, see you next time. Bye.